Hi, I'm Rich Melvin. I'm standing in the shop of the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society in front of C&O locomotive number 2716. In recent months, you perhaps have read in the various hobby magazines about an unfortunate boiler accident that occurred at the Gettysburg Railroad. The accident occurred when the crown sheet of one of their steam engines let go and severely injured both men of the engine crew. In our continuing series of how steam locomotives work, we thought that we would take a moment in this issue of O-Gauge Railroading the Video to show you just what a crown sheet is and why it's so important to keep it covered with water. A steam locomotive boiler is actually made up of several parts. The firebox is at the rear of the boiler, and this is where the fire's laid in. Just forward of the firebox is the combustion chamber. Now, some early steam engines did not have combustion chambers. This long cylindrical section is the actual boiler. It contains the flues and tubes and is filled with several thousand gallons of water, which surrounds those tubes. And at the front is the smoke box, which contains the exhaust nozzle and the smokestack. Only exhaust steam and flue gases go through the smoke box. It's not actually a part of the boiler itself. Let's go inside the boiler. We're going to stand right here and look towards the rear of the engine. Now, fortunately for us, in this engine, the tubes and flues have been removed, so we can easily get inside the boiler. We're also fortunate because a portion of the rear flue sheet has been removed to make a repair, and this will let us see the crown sheet itself from both sides. This is the water side of the crown sheet, and this is the fire side. The heat from the fire on this side is what boils the water on this side. This piece of steel that's filled with holes is called the rear flue sheet. Normally, these holes would contain big pipes or flues, which would fill the space right where we are standing. This outer circle is the round boiler shell, and this oddly shaped area in the middle is the firebox. Between the boiler shell and the firebox are hundreds of stay bolts, which support the firebox against the pressure of steam in the boiler. The water fills the boiler and surrounds the firebox on all sides. The water is always above the crown sheet, which is right here. The crown sheet forms the top of the firebox and is the area that would be left dry if the water level was to get too low. Normally, the water is held well above the crown sheet. The intense heat of the fire is drawn off by the water, and that generates the steam. This is exactly the same principle as boiling a pan of water on the stove. As long as there's water in the pan, you can turn the heat up as high as you want, and all that happens is the water boils. But let the water boil away so there's no water in the pan, and then what happens? The heat from the fire is no longer absorbed by the water. It's absorbed directly by the steel. When that happens, so much heat is absorbed by the steel that it starts to soften and lose its strength. It actually starts to melt. And this is precisely what happened at the Gettysburg Railroad. For some reason, the water level was allowed to get below the level of the crown sheet, so there was no water covering the sheet. Without the water there to absorb the heat of the fire, the steel began to melt, and the steam pressure forced it away from the stay bolts. When water is under pressure, its boiling point is well above the normal 212 degrees Fahrenheit. For example, at 200 pounds of pressure, water doesn't boil until it reaches 388 degrees. The danger in the crown sheet failure was that when the sheet softened and tore away from the stay bolts, all the pressure was released from the boiler. When that happened, all the water turned to steam almost instantly. It is this instantaneous expansion of the water from liquid to gas that causes the explosion. When the energy of steam is controlled, it can safely do a tremendous amount of work. But when steam energy gets out of control, the damage it can do is considerable. Well, now you should know where the crown sheet is, what it does, and why it's so important to keep it covered with water.